Okay, so I guess we are live.
Yeah, we are.
Hey
Have you seen
guys,
the countdown?
Yeah. The countdown just got in, so yeah, we are live.
Okay.
so hey,
Okay, great. So can you hear me?
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, great. So welcome to today's podcast, Avneesh. So basically today's podcast is like totally based on APIs, application programming interface, APIs, it stands for. And yeah, welcome to today's podcast. And we'll be going to speak about APIs today. And yes, like today's guest is like Avneesh. So Avneesh, introduce yourself to our audience.
hey guys. So I'm Avneesh Agarwal. I am a full stack web developer. I live in India, and I am 13 years old, and I love to do programming and build web apps and websites. So today we are going to talk all about APIs, and we'll see what is API, the different types of APIs which are there, and many more. So basically, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So we're planning to do this podcast every week, and over here we are planning to start this new series called All About Series. Like we were having server side rendering last week, it was all about server side rendering. This time it is all about APIs. So next time we might cover another all about. So we are planning to do this series, right, Darshan?
Yeah, right. You're totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, like we'll just like start with the podcast, and as I told, like today's topic is about APIs. So yeah, Arjun, you can start, and Avnish, you can also start with the API. So let's like first of all tell the agenda of today's podcast, like what will we going to cover in this podcast, what you'll be going to speak, and all stuff.
So the agenda of the API is to tell you what exactly is an API, the different things that you can do with an API, the technologies you can use to create an API, and the databases, deployment of the API, and many more, like fetching the data as well. So I think we should get
Okay,
started.
that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
we shall just get started.
Yeah. So
So yeah,
basically,
just
what
do
is
an
an
introduction about APIs. Yeah, go
Yeah.
on.
So, what is an API? An API is API stands for Application Programming Interface. So this helps you to create a connection between your front end and back end. So suppose you have some data which is in backend and you want to show it to the client. So you will make an API and fetch the API so you can get the data. So let me give you an example. You go to a restaurant and ask the waiter to get some food. The waiter will tell the chefs in the kitchen to get what food, and the chefs will prepare it and give it to the waiter. So the waiter is the API. In this case, the we are the web client and the chefs will be the web server. So this is how a basic API works.
Yeah. So I'd like
Anything
to
to add?
add on something to this, and so basically APIs is something you see on all the websites. So there are APIs literally for everything. There are APIs for booking air tickets, like the data. Basically, API is where a data is stored. Like there are a lot of data stored, and then you can pull the data and then give it to your front end. Like you can display that on your website, and the clients can see the information or the data.
Yeah, like
Yeah, and
yeah,
you
like we
can
can say the
also
thing is
post
that in
data.
yeah, like we can say like besides every web application or besides every website, there is an API situated. So that is what we are going to talk
Yeah,
about. So basically the
Yeah.
thing is that API stands for Application Programming Interface, and like if you want to learn like more about API, so that is what this podcast is based for. So yeah, go on, Amish.
yeah. Yeah, so there are different HTTP methods for API, like post method, which will help you to send data to your backend, and get method, which will pull the data from the backend, and many more like put. And put is similar to post, but this helps us to edit data. So it will post the data and edit it, and the other is delete. So it will just delete the data. We will need to provide the ID of the data which it needs to delete. and this is how you get shared functionality in your web app, which stands for create, read, update, and delete. So, anything to add on, you guys?
Yeah, so basically API is something very integral if you want to become a full stack developer, because wherever you go, wherever you go, there are APIs, and you will, of course, there will be a task for you to work with APIs. So learning how to integrate APIs into your project is a great skill, and I I I personally believe that everyone should know how to integrate APIs into their project.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So basically, now let's talk about like if the introduction about APIs are clear. So let's move on to how to like which are the types of APIs and how to integrate them in your web application or website, right?
Yeah. So the different types of API architectures are REST, GraphQL, and SOAP. So the most popularly used right now is REST API, and GraphQL is another one which is rising pretty fast. And in GraphQL, basically you will only get the data you need. The excessive data will not be fetched because it will only increase the load size of the JavaScript bundle. And soap is not being used nowadays, but it was very famous before. Yeah, so these are the main three types of API architectures. And
Yeah, so I've also heard that like you can build APIs, like you can make APIs yourselves.
yeah,
Yeah, we can build
Yeah,
APIs. That's
yeah,
amazing.
types of API. Like so, GraphQL is like something like a really big trend going on right. Like Avni said, it's growing really fast right now. But I still like whenever I'm like, if you search on YouTube or Google about APIs, and so the rest keyword will always be there. So REST is, I think, the more like Avnish mentioned, REST is the
yeah,
most popular architecture, API architecture.
Yeah,
yeah,
it is
exactly.
it is becoming so popular too. And like compared to SOAP and GraphQL, REST API is like in trend, and lots of developers are moving towards REST API and they are using that.
Yeah, and
And to
REST
talk about
API
like
is
different,
pretty easy to work with.
Yeah,
yeah, that's
it's
true. That's
yeah.
true.
So the REST API, like it is REST,
Yeah, so it stands for representational state transfer. So you can easily transfer data and post data in your web apps. So this is what it is.
Yeah, and also one more thing, like there are like two types of different kinds of APIs, right? Like compare like there are some in the form of like REST API, GraphQL API, or something like that, and there are like some non-technical APIs, like some non-technical APIs are like that, like some websites are present over here like on internet, and some of them are like Spotify, NASA, and some of them are like NASA is there, Spotify is there, and Notion is there, right?
Yeah,
And there
public
is like some
APIs and
another also.
internal APIs.
Internal APIs, yeah,
Pub-
that's what I was talking about.
so public
So
APIs you
basically,
can easily use them in your app.
yeah, you can like easily use them in your app. Like there's some API key that is just like we need to copy and paste in our code. So like it just like
Yeah,
works. So there are like some internal public APIs that we can use, and some of the examples are like Notion APIs here. Like we can use Notion API. There is Google API, like Google Maps API for like adding some location on your like website or web application. So we can use like Google Maps API to integrate some location like where is the shop situated or something like kind of stuff. And like there is after like regarding this, there is another API called like NASA API. So like it is useful for like seeing some space data, seeing some kind of like images of the spaces and all stuff. So some application developers or full stack web developers are like using that. Another is like Poke API. So Poke API comes in the form of Fun API, like pulling all the Pokemon data. So if you're creating a Pokemon application like Pokédex that I created using React Native when I was learning. So in that like I use Poke API. So for like pulling the data of like Pokemons. And the next is like Polygon API. So Polygon API is being like used for pulling the information about like some restaurants and all the stuff. So for that like this is some kind of like public APIs. and one of the most important is Stripe. You know Stripe, right? For the payment
Yeah.
integration.
Yeah,
Yeah, so for
right.
the payment integration, we are using Stripe. So
So it
like these
is,
are some kind of like, yeah,
yeah,
Stripe and PayPal. They are the
yeah,
most famous one for
PayPal, yeah,
payment.
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So,
that's true.
so APIs represent something called SaaS, software as a service. So what that means is like basically it's not like a company or something. A person creates a software first, and then they either like they can present that as a service. So APIs is something a part of that. So once a person like creates an API, and then he can like he puts it on some website. So actually Rapid API is a great website to get to know all the public APIs, and if you want to work with any of them. And also it's a great place for you to upload your own APIs and like get more APIs too. So like any popular website you visit, like lots of popular websites you visit, they'll always have like something called a developer section over there, and there there'll be something called an API. So keep an eye out for that if you really want to use that application's API. Like Spotify has an API, and if you're trying to build something like a music player or something, that API will really help you.
Yeah, public APIs. Many websites have nowadays, like
Yeah,
SpaceX, NASA.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it is really useful.
Yeah, even Google Books has an API.
Yeah, Google Books. That was we tried it out. It was
Yeah, yeah.
so. And one was Open Weather API. Like it gets you real time weather data, so you can build an weather app easily with it.
Weather app easily with that. I personally built my weather app using that itself.
Yeah, and Rapid API, like you said, is very useful. You can get many APIs from it, and you can even sell your APIs on it. So
Exactly. That's a great way to monetize your API. Like if you
yeah,
create an API. So Rapid API is great website. So I suggest
it is a
after
great
this,
marketplace.
yeah. So I suggest after this you can just take a look at rapidapi.com.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
should we discuss about technologies you can use to create some APIs?
sure. Before that I just want to add a point, like when you like if you don't know like what are the tags of the API or what are the parameters of the API, then I suggest just go to the raw file that you see and see the parameters over there. And then when you're writing, like when you're working with that API on your code text editor, there you can like easily fill in the fields, and then it becomes easier to work with the API. So whenever you're working with the API, I suggest first look at the raw data first. That helps you analyze the API better, and you can work with it really easily after that.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yes, I
that
think we can move on to the next point.
yeah, so like how can you build some APIs? So the technologies you can use is like Node.js, Python, PHP or UB as well. So these can help you build some APIs easily, and you can even monetize them as you said by using Rapid API and selling it on them. So this API will be available for everyone to use, and if you want to host it then it will be available for everyone to use, or you can add some keys and you will be only able to use.
Yeah. Even like the most many companies, what they do is when they take the data which they have on their website and convert the same data into an API and put it onto these platforms, so that their own company gets more reach, whereas the API is also getting used. So that's a great marketing strategy used by many companies regarding APIs.
Yeah, they build Webscaper bots so that they can get data from different websites and then they combine the data to make their own APIs. So it is very useful.
Yeah,
And Node.js is pretty famous for building APIs because JavaScript is what you will ideally use for building front end website for yourself. The so only JavaScript will be consistent throughout your app. So that is also good.
Node.js is a great uh,
Yeah.
it's a great platform, like it's a great framework for you to build. Node.js actually allows you to do a lot of things, and building APIs is one of those things you can do on Node.js.
Yeah, cloud functions are letting go.
Yeah, yeah,
So in this API you have built, where will the data be stored? So the data will be stored in something called some databases. So like there are many different databases like MongoDB, PostgreSQL and MySQL, and there are many more. So MongoDB is one of the most famous databases for NoSQL, and Postgres and MySQL are SQL database. So NoSQL is easier to understand, but SQL is more organized, and most big tech companies use SQL databases.
exactly. Facebook actually uses, like it used that for a quite a long time. It started with the SQL database, and it used a SQL database till a long time. and
Yeah,
I uh, and I personally believe that MongoDB, like if you're trying to build an API with a node, like with Node.js, then I would recommend you to make a MongoDB database, since MongoDB and Node.js are part of something called the merge stack, which is
yeah,
like a full stack, like it's a full complete stack for you to build your full stack web application.
yeah. Mon, mean, mev. The
Exactly.
I is represented by React and A for Angular.
Also, one
V
more
for
thing, like Avneesh, give some examples of internal APIs, like as we have seen some examples of public APIs. So now, what are internal APIs and how to use them? Also, give this.
Yeah, so internal APIs are like you can't use them exactly, but internal APIs will be only used in the people who have built it. Like, let me give you some examples. So suppose you are building a company, and you want that the data should not be accessible by anyone else except the people of the company, and it will be only displayed on the site which the company owns. So we will use an internal API, and the full, so you will add a credential for it. So if the credential is correct, then only the API will be a then only the API will be accessible, and you can post data, get data. No one else can edit the data. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
these
That's true.
Yeah. So what happens with many APIs is that, like Avnish was mentioning about internal APIs and the credentials. There's the a thought came to my mind, like, so what happens with many APIs is that it's paid. So they have free version too, but they allow you to do limited things. And there also there's like some credentials which you can use to get access to the API, and then there's of course a link from where you can fetch the API. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's what you can so but these days what is happening is many people are trying to create open source APIs for everyone, like open source APIs, so that that's more easier to use, I feel, since like there's nothing paid. And open source is the way to go. Open source is like the future of
Yeah.
development.
And Amazon is like using internal APIs, because I don't think we can access the data from Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, or because they have like like a lot of data, and it's like a crud app.
Yeah.
Amazon, it's a CRUD app. Yeah.
So,
So yeah. So I think we'll
Also,
move
yeah,
on
like
to
I hope, yeah,
yeah.
that only.
So
Like I hope, like geeks has been like cleared with internal APIs and difference between internal and public APIs and what are APIs actually. So let's move towards like how to integrate an API in your web application or website. So like it's an complex part, yeah, I know, but how to integrate them. So as we have seen, like public APIs are like really easy to integrate, but how to integrate internal APIs. So yeah, move on, Amish.
yeah, so we will basically, as I said, we will use a credential which will be only given to certain people, and it will be stored in some secure area of the app, so that nobody can get access to it. And if the data is sensitive and someone gets access, then the company can get into trouble. So yeah.
there's hackers, and there are
Yeah.
hackers, and there are malwares, and all sorts of bad stuff that you don't want, like you don't want them to harm your website. So yeah.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
think we can move on to the public APIs now. Like
Yeah,
the
we have done that now.
no, like the examples and
Yeah.
yeah, sure, yeah.
So some examples we gave like Open Weather API, Pokédex, and so in this APIs while fetching it, you don't need to add any API. You can add some API keys, which will some companies have API keys so that the user cannot just spam it, and you the number of requests will be limited. But some API keys are also there which will not limit the data, and you can just send millions of requests and it will still work. Like in Open Weather API, you need to provide a credential. In Unsplash API also, but in some APIs like which one? But in some APIs you don't need to provide any keys. So that is very easy to integrate. In Google Books API also, it is not compulsory to add a key, but adding the key will also give you two extra features.
Yeah. So Unsplash API is a really great API. Like if you want to build like an image application or something like that, or you want like random images generating every time someone refreshes a page, Unsplash API is a great API that you can use for that.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is
and
for
in
like pulling images.
yeah,
Yeah.
Unsplash is like a website for getting images, and the Unsplash APIs provides you
Free stock
you
images.
can yeah, and in here we also can add a parameter in the URL so that it gives certain things. Like if you add a search query in the Unsplash API, then it will give you images related to that search only. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
also
basically now, like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So also that I feel
yeah,
that about the Google Books API also. So like there are when you're trying to fetch the API, there are parameters that you can use on the web itself. There you can, like Google Books API is, again, it's about books. So books have a lot of genres like fiction, sci-fi, uh,
yeah,
romance,
sci-fi,
mystery.
fiction, comedy. Yeah,
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 Yeah.
yeah.
exactly. So you can provide parameters up there. Like if you type fiction for suppose, then it'll show you like fiction results. It'll show you the data of fiction results, and
Filtering
then
of the data, you can tell.
yeah, like the data of all the fiction books that are there in the API that's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
stored in the API. That's a great thing which you can do too in public APIs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so basically the thing is that like these are APIs like that some developers has built and that's like really awesome. So let's take an example like if you're building a bookstore, okay, there is a bookstore and you just like landed that gig as a freelancer and you're building a website of him. So like Google Books API is like really useful for it, like right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that only. And like
I was
as we have
looking
like seen some, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was looking at the YouTube chat right now, and there was this another great API that I think Karthik mentioned, and it is called the TMDB API, and
Yeah.
a
To
lot
get
of
the movies.
yeah,
movie data. So if
yeah.
you're trying,
TMDB API is like if you're making Netflix clone and stuff, that will
yeah,
be
something
helpful.
like that, or if you want to build your own movie application, then you can use the TMDB API for to get the movie, like to get the movies, and the same way like we mentioned about Google Books API, you can use the same parameters over there about the
Hmm.
different genres that are mentioned, and like that you can do.
Yeah. And yeah.
So like there's this API for about like SpaceX also has an API.
Yeah, Spacex API. So
Yeah,
it will give all the rocket dates. It will be launched the some images and a lot.
yeah,
It is one great API. So should we continue the discussion about the databases?
yeah, yeah. Sure, yeah, sure. If you have
Yeah.
any more.
So we were saying that many companies are using NoSQL database and SQL databases. So NoSQL is less organized but very easier to understand, and the SQL database is a bit tougher to understand, but it is very organized, and many big companies prefer SQL over NoSQL, and
Yeah,
like companies using post, suppose we want to know the companies using PostgreSQL such as Uber, Netflix, Instagram, Spotify. These all use SQL database, which is PostgreSQL. It is one of the type of SQL databases that is very famous.
yeah,
And for MongoDB also there are many companies like Toyota, Forbes, and many.
yeah. Avneesh and Darshan, just correct me here if I'm wrong, but I also believe that Mapbox, which is a great thing to like, which is a great another free alternative of Google Maps to integrate maps into your project. So it also has an API, I believe, right? Like
Yeah, you are right. You are totally right. So basically, Mapbox is similar to Google Maps. Like it is an alternative. We can tell. Yeah, obviously we can tell it is alternative itself to Google Maps. And Mapbox is like an amazing like API we can tell, and it's a company basically. But yeah, they also like have an API of Mapbox, and that we can like integrate in our web application and websites as in the previous build in the Airbnb clone of Sunny's build. So he has like used that, and that was like pretty amazing. So yeah,
yeah, that
Mapbox is
was.
great, and it also has some features. So that is really amazing.
So
Yeah,
Mapbox is this another cool thing where you can when you're generating a map, there like so it prepares an API based on the branding, like the customization you do. So this is your app's front end, like this is your dashboard, and you're trying to select a map. And when you select one map, then you can even customize it. Like you can add your own colors to it, and that's how you make the map. And then according to all those results, then the API is specifically made for you, and then you get that credentials and like how to integrate it.
yeah.
Yeah,
So it also requires
Yeah,
some
that's true.
credentials to use.
yeah. So almost all the APIs that you use require some sort of credentials, and that's how you use APIs into your project.
Yeah,
Yes, that's obviously.
because the APIs which have the credentials mostly have a limit, that is a number of requests that you can send or get, so that their servers don't get spam and crash. So if
Yeah,
you cross the limit, then you will not get the data anymore. You will need to either update some plan or something. Yeah.
yeah. That so sometimes what happens is that like many websites that are just built for practice suddenly get a lot of attraction, and they might have been using some sort of API, and that's how like they like the API just stops and the website goes down. Like there is no point
Yeah.
of a website if all the work is dependent on an API, right? So
Yeah.
also like a tip I'd like to
Yeah,
share for using APIs is that whenever you get those sort of credentials for API, I always like we all use that practice, and it is that you should create an environment local file. So what
Yeah.
that does is that since what is happening is that you never want to reveal your API keys online, since because sometimes if you're building like a project for practice, then if you want to host it on Vercel or Netlify, suppose, so you'll have to upload the site to GitHub, and what over the and of course everybody can view the site on GitHub. Of course you can keep it private,
Yeah.
but you want everybody to view the code that you have written, and that's how people know like you write like you use good practices. So I all
That
like
makes
then
sense.
we always you can in the environment.local file you can like suppose I'm using like the Stripe API. So I type Stripe API key, and then I paste the key over there. And then when I'm using like I want the key, of course I want the key in my project, like in the code, like the file where I'm writing my code. Over there I can just in the brackets I can put Stripe API key, and that will like since in the environment local file it is the like the API key is stored over there. It can like it can just you don't have to reveal anything. And also please don't like put your of course GitHub won't accept it, but never try to like put your local files online, since that
Yeah.
contains private credentials, and
Yeah.
that's like a lot of traction for hackers and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they are the environment variables, and you can, and if you are deploying the site somewhere, they will also ask for the credentials, so it is safe to put there. And in GitHub, like, you should never push the keys so that and no one can access it. And you, if that key is exposed, then others can also access the same things that you can access.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Yeah, and
And
also
that,
one more thing I want to bring up over here is that like there are some also some tools like that we can generate APIs, RESTful APIs we can generate. So some of them are like you may know Postman. The Postman is a like amazing and popular tool that like we use and it is for like generating some RESTful APIs. So with the methods
so
that we have been told at the beginning of the podcast like put, get, post, all these methods. So in the Postman, these are like really available. And also one more thing, there's like an extension for Visual Studio Code. Of course, like there's an VS Code, and
Thunder
that we
client,
use coders. Thunder Client, yeah, you guessed it right. So Thunder Client is an like extension for generating APIs. And yeah, these were like
you
just
can
some tools
test.
that I want to bring up over here.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
test the APIs in Postman and Thunder client to check that the APIs is currently working. You can pass in everything that you can pass in there. Before testing, before deploying the site, you will obviously need to check if the that is working, because the
API
front
is
end
working
and
or
back
not.
end will
Yeah.
be, yeah, because the front end and back end will be completely separate, so you can't test it before deploying the APIs.
yeah, so like I think we have talked a bit. Like I just want to give you this like example. So this is something a bit funny that just to lighten the mood. So as all of us know, like McDonald's McDonald's most of the times has broken ice cream machines. So what there was this guy, and what he did was he built an API, like he built, so he took data from the McDonald's API and he built his own API where he reverse engineered an API. Now I don't know what that I know that very well what that term reverse engineering an
Yeah,
API means, but he reverse engineered it, and he got like it was for US, and he got the he got the result. He got the stores where the ice cream machine was working, and that's how he could display the results. So what he did was then after that he created a simple basic website to put whatever the API which he has built, and he put that onto his website. And he, of course, he made it as a joke. He didn't want to monetize it or do anything with it. He made it as a joke just because, like, just for fun. And literally after 20 minutes of launch, the site got so much attraction. Like, it had so much traffic that the site was like, the site broke down since it was not
yeah.
handled. Like, yeah. So I
Oh,
found
that's
out this.
awesome.
Yeah. So I found out this through a call Holden video.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this was a pretty funny one. And reverse engineering an API means basically means that he got the data from another API and then just built an API with it, or so that he can get data and
Okay.
transform it in his own way. And then he just built a front end which shows that if the API, if the ice cream machine is broken or it is working. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
this
true.
is
And one more
actually
thing, like I think, yeah, like I think like we got like just done with this like internal APIs, public APIs, and what is an actually an API. So
yeah.
and tools that we are using for testing and pulling APIs. So I also want to bring up one thing over here is that like there are like some things like no one knows what are like no one knows like what are APIs actually are used for. So I want to tell that over here. So basically the thing is that like actually APIs are like used for several things, okay, like including like several things that is like used for. So some of them are like APIs like are used for some desktop applications that you use in your desktop. So for them, behind them, besides them, there is an one API situated and desktop applications are like using some APIs. There are like APIs behind some most of the web applications. So besides web application, there are like some APIs and like some of them are like what do we say to it like some web applications are like some Slack as a web application that we use.
yeah,
And besides that, there is an API. RESTful API is being used in Slack behind the Slack web application. So Slack is
Yeah.
a desktop application too, mobile application too, web application too. So besides
Yeah,
that, this is
exactly.
used for. And
Yeah,
API
so they
connects
have a
device
single,
to the internet. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and they have a single database so that the messages can easily sync and you will get the same message everywhere.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
That's true.
So I think if you like want to try it out something similar, like for two. So let's not go to that complex. Like you want to build a web desktop app, then a web app, and then a mobile app too. So, but if you want just like if you want for practice, if you want to test something like real, suppose you want to build a chat app, like then I suggest that you try out Firestore database, which is like a real time database with syncs, and it's for Firebase. So yeah, that's something really great, and it syncs immediately, and it yeah, that's the point I was making.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, got it. That's fine. And like API connects like device to the internet that you may know. And yeah, APIs define the networks that you also know. So yeah, that are like lots of uses of APIs that we know, and we are also using APIs. We have used public APIs, we have used internal APIs, we have integrated them, we have generated them. So like these are some like common ways and some common tools and tips for like API using. So using API. So this was some definition of using an API. I hope that's clear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on then, Avnish.
So, like as you said here in Slack, you will also need some authentication for that. So you can also do authentication via API. So this will connect the client server and the client server with the back client side, which means that the server will be the backend of your app and the client will be the front end of your app, like the website or the web app. So here you can use something like auth 2, which is the thing.
Auto. Yeah, oh,
No,
auto, yeah.
actually auth
No,
2.
there's a
Yeah,
difference
so
between both.
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
so auth 2 is used to develop APIs which can all handle authentication. So you will need to add something like a client ID and client secret, which will create a user at the backend. And this can also happen on multiple devices, so everything is synced. Yeah, so basically this is what.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. And said like some of the developers and some of the people are like also having some doubt like why should you care about API? Like why should you even use API? So like yeah, I must look like curious about that. So the reason behind that is like API is one thing, actually a one thing. They're like it helps you to access the data that you need. And it is like really simple to integrate API in your web application. And yeah, that's really simple to integrate an API. That's really simple to use an API, and that's really simple to like understand the API. So API is nothing much like that. Not API is not that much hard, complex. We can tell like hard thing. It is like really an easy thing. Application programming interface. It stands for. And yeah, it is just like used for accessing the data that you need in a simple manner. That's done, right?
Accessing data and manipulating data as well. You can manipulate data by posting method, by post methods, put by editing them. Yeah. So
Yeah.
suppose you have a form. Suppose you have a form, you will send a post request to the post request via the API, and it will fill the form data and send it to the backend. So the data is there in the backend. Suppose you want to show the form details to the same user, you will just show the details in, and this will use a get method. These are the different HTTP protocols which are used. So this get method will get all the data from the database.
So yeah,
That's
so
true.
like
Yeah.
moving on to like Darshan's previous question, like why do you really use APIs? So like the biggest of the websites in the world actually use APIs, and they use some APIs in like the back end. Like we don't even know when they use APIs. Like us as developers also, we don't get to understand like when they're using APIs, but they actually like the and like if you want to code and it's API is just a lot of time saving. Like instead of writing your own data, you can literally get data from an API and just get work done faster, right? Like instead of typing the own data that you're making, you just do that. And also like these days, when you're trying to do authentication, so the old way of doing authentication in your websites was like you just make a form, then connected to a database, and there was a lot of PHP and other, like, then Nodejs and those stuff involved. But these days there are there are platforms like Clerk and Auth0, which can be used to do
Yeah.
authentication, and those
Yeah.
are actually
Yes.
not like hardcore APIs, but they are like a software as a service product, and they actually use APIs in the background, like where you
Yeah,
can.
behind the scenes, they are
Yeah,
using APIs to do all the stuff. Like
yeah.
OAuth 2, which I said, they are using OAuth 2 for all the authentication. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
mobile factor authentication. So there is one example of mobile factor authentication. So there
Yeah,
is one
true.
Slack channel, and if you join the Slack channel, so there you need to do, and like if see there are like two devices. Okay, there are two devices. One is desktop and one is mobile. So you need to join the same Slack channel using your mobile. So there is like OAuth2 authentication, means mobile factorization. So means like if you join with the mobile, or if you join with the desktop, the same Slack channel. So you need to like there will be an OTP code that will come to your mobile, and then you have to like just add that to your OTP code text box, and then you need to proceed. This is an like one and like example of mobile factorization like OAuth2. So yeah, like I realized that I also used that once. So yeah,
Oh, that's nice. That's great.
Yeah, it
yeah.
makes
So means like
things
it is
more
for
secure.
also. Yeah, that only I was like taking up over here. It more like it makes most of the things very secure. So that's why this OAuth2 is being used. To be
Yeah,
honest.
or to and other like authentication platforms in general. So that just makes your work secure. Like you don't have to worry about any other side hassles for you. Like, and it is like you can just get using OAuth2 or zero clerk. You can just get like done with your authentication process just in a day. Like it won't even take you a day. It's that simple to integrate, and you just need to like just get to know how to integrate, and the docs are not that bad. Like the docs are pretty good too. So just like if you can't find like a good tutorial or something, docs is the best way. Document reading the documentation is the best way.
Documentation, yeah.
Yeah, and like
Docs are
many,
like
if
pretty
you
much
are,
written very well.
yeah, if suppose some app does not have a good documentation, maybe that app is not, maybe that library or API is not that good. But if you think that it is very good, or you just need to use it, then there must be some tutorial on it. Like you just
Tutorials
have to
available on
search
internet.
properly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
true.
you search properly, you will get that.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
true.
So yeah, so like I think we can move on to the next point. Like, how do you actually pull data from an API? I think we could do that right now,
Yeah,
since
Yeah,
we are
sure,
not.
sure.
so
That is what in our
so
forecast. Yeah.
we will maybe just try and focus on JavaScript based, which is front. Suppose you have a web application and you need to get data. It is suppose JS, you are using a JavaScript library like React. So what are the methods you can get it? So we can use the fetch to get the API. So this is an inbuilt JavaScript function. So this is an async function. So you will get the data from the API, and you can even post the data from the fetch function in JavaScript only. But the fetch function in JavaScript is easy, but not as easy as another library which is called Axios. So Axios makes sending data, getting data in a JavaScript app very easier. So it is one of the very good ways, but you will need to install a library for it.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Arjun?
Yeah. So, like they're async and await. So there are like a few set of rules when you try to like fetch an APM. First, first and the foremost is that you have it. It's of course done inside a function, right? Then
Yeah,
yeah. So you have to make an async function, and then only you can use the await fetch method. So what it basically does is it tells that like just wait till the data from the API gets fetched, and then like it gets to the middle server. Then you can use something called JavaScript promises to then further decide what you want the data to be done, like pull the data. Like you can, there's something called like there's something called then in JavaScript, and it is like a JavaScript promise, and that you can use. Then there's also request and response, right, Avneesh? When you try
yeah,
to use,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah. So
rec
request and Yeah, request and response is like you are sending a request to the backend, and suppose you send a request and then the backend will give you a response which is suppose like the data. So you ask for the specific data, and it will be in the request, and the data will come in the response.
Yeah,
Request is
that's
what
right.
you send to the backend, and response is what comes from the backend.
Comes
Yeah.
from the backend. Yeah.
So like there's if you know Swift, anyone knows Swift over here? Like what
Yeah, I know
Swift
Swift.
is? Yeah,
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 Swift.
I know
like it
what
is
Swift
for
is, but I
iOS
never worked
apps.
with.
Yeah, iOS
Yeah,
apps.
iOS
So
application development.
so the actually the result, like the way of pulling API in Swift is also pretty similar to the JavaScript. So I know I can't explain like the proper syntax like we all did in JavaScript right now, but I know that it uses async, await, and fetch to get data for the app you're trying to build in Swift. Yeah, for iOS development.
Yeah,
Yeah, and one more thing I want
and
to tell that basically how to integrate APIs. So how to integrate public APIs I will tell, and you can tell how to integrate internal APIs, Amish. So how to integrate
okay.
public APIs means like there are some several sites as we have discussed at the beginning of the podcast. So there is an API ID, okay, like a key ID, API ID. So going on, like let's take an example of Stripe itself. So I'll just like take an example of Stripe. So basically there is a Stripe website. So you have to go on Stripe website and we will be in the test mode. So Stripe is an website, Stripe is an JavaScript library, Stripe is an API for integrating payment in your websites and web application. Lots of people are using Stripe, and PayPal is also like an API. And so basically Stripe, like if you go on Stripe, so there will be an test mode available. So means like you'll be in the test mode for testing mode for seeing the output. And if you change that test mode to the live mode, you can like start using Stripe as an in the real life. Means like you can like start using it for like real world payment. So how to integrate that? So basically there is an like key ID over there in the developers mode. You just have to copy that key ID. You have to go in your JavaScript file where you have created your checkout.js file or something kind of thing. So there is like an constant given, constant function. Then you have to like just paste over there. Okay, you have to paste that key ID over there. And after pasting that key ID, you have to just go live. Means like you have to just like see the output. So after seeing the output, like there will be an like a checkout form will appear. So you have to like just fill in the dummy data of like the site is providing the dummy data, the card example. So you can like just type in the card number, the like expiry date of your card number, and just continue and proceed. So this is an like example of like Stripe integrating an public API. So Stripe is a public API, of course, and like this we integrate an public API. So like that we integrate, and if you change that test mode to live mode, so you will be live, and you can like start if you host that website live on the internet. So you can like start like getting payments from the outside. So like this we integrate an public API, and like this like Stripe was an example of the public API. So I hope that's clear to our geeks. And yeah, go on, Avnish. You can tell about how to integrate internal APIs.
Yeah, so in internal APIs, you will probably have like in suppose you are building an app in Next.js, so the API will be built into the so it will be a whole full stack application. But suppose you are building something like React, you will need to host the app, and you will also need an API key which is only available for the company to use. It will have a separate dashboard and all. So it will be it will be pretty much similar to how you fetch a public API, but the main difference is that the public API is for all of the people to use, but internal APIs is not. Only the company can use it.
Yeah. And also like when you're trying to like Darshan said, but when you're trying to like use async or await, like all of that, when you're trying to fetch an API, you have to put that inside a use effect.
Yeah, and that is only specific to React, but you
Yeah,
can
React.
do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's only specific, React specific.
Yeah, and the podcast that was last week held, which was all about SSR. So you can
Yeah,
also
SSR,
fetch the
yeah.
APIs. So you can also fetch the API server on the server, so that data comes instantly as the site loads. So it will be So in the SSR also you will use the fetch method. You will use the JavaScript fetch to get the data, and it will be pretty much easy and the same. But
Yeah.
yeah, the data will be fetched on the server and it will load instantly.
Yeah,
In the fetch,
Yeah.
in the
we
fetch
talked
there
about
will be a
that.
flicker.
Yeah. So we talked about that in the last podcast. So what you can do for that is you can use Axios too, and async await both. So what you can do is below, like after the last line of your code, then you can type export default server side props, and then like do all the bracket stuff, and then you can like fetch that API using Axios or async await, and from that below that you can pass them down as props, and then you can call that on the main function that's there in brackets, and then you can get results from that API. So I know that might seem like a big process, like a much more complicated process than uh, like what do you call a normal async await, but you don't have to use JavaScript promises when you're doing that, since it already passes everything as props. And when you do that, it's like we discussed the benefits of server side rendering in the last podcast. So yeah,
Yeah,
so it just gives you server side rendered APIs, like
yeah,
server side rendered data.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct. So let's talk about deployment of the API as well.
Yeah,
So
sure. Go
suppose
on.
you have built API. So to use it an actual content app or any app, you will need to deploy it because you just can't use it for a local machine in the local. So we can use services like Heroku, AWS, or Vercel to deploy the APIs. Or you can also build your own server with server or Raspberry Pi, where the whole backend is hosted. So, but that would be more complicated, and most and many big companies use that method only because they have their whole big servers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think that would that won't be free, since Raspberry Pi's to set up a Raspberry Pi server like a backend, you'll have to purchase the kit, like, and it's like a full proper manual thing which you can attach, and
yeah.
there
So
all yeah, it's like that server, it's like a built-in, like it's like a built server, it's not anywhere on the web, it is like a hard
yeah,
like
So Heroku Vercel is easier and mostly used for smaller projects and personal projects. Like suppose I would build a project right now, so I would most likely host it on Heroku or maybe Vercel. Yeah,
Yeah, so Heroku and Vercel are great platforms to like
yeah,
host the.
and AWS also, but AWS gives a lot of other functions as well. So yeah,
Yeah, it
you
is
can host it.
Amazon, right? AWS.
Yeah, Amazon Web Services.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Amazon Web Services.
yeah. So, so anything more like Avneesh, you have planned for like today, or like we can conclude this?
Yeah, this was all for today.
Yeah,
This was all I had planned for today, and this is pretty much all about API you need to know. And suppose you want to ask me some questions, you can ask, and
Yeah,
I will
but
just answer.
yeah. Darshan, you were
yeah,
saying
so like
something?
you can just like drop your questions in the comment section below. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
Yeah,
I'm doing. So you can like just drop your questions in the comment section. We will try our best to answer that. And just like a quick recap about this podcast. So this podcast was like all about APIs, like application programming interface, and APIs are like used for like pulling the data, accessing the data to your web servers, to your web applications, mobile applications, and all the stuff. There are two types
yeah,
of the APIs available right now: internal APIs and external APIs. Means like your public APIs. We have also given some examples of internal and public APIs. In the internal APIs, there are some APIs like REST API, Graphql API, webhooks, and all the stuff. And in the public APIs, there are some other examples like some public APIs like local APIs like Spotify API, then NASA API, Notion API, then
yeah.
your like Open with the Map API. So like these were like some examples of
And he got cut.
Yeah, the video and voice shows.
Yeah. So like I would like to put another point over here. Even the smallest of things like on a website use APIs. So I was building this currency converter recently, and that was for another app which I was building. So it was not like a full fledged currency converter app, but I was wanting to build it. So I used an API for that, since it would take a lot of time if I have gone created like my own API, or not even an API. If I would have tried to put my own data, and that would like take a lot of time. But I could like find this nice block, because to be honest, I couldn't find like a lot of APIs. But then there was this good open source API which was there. I don't exactly
Oh,
remember the name, but let me, if I could just go through that and chuck that into the chat box. It was a Geeks article only. Through that, I could do it. So yeah, it's like even the smallest of things that you see on a website use APIs. So I suggest that all of you should use like we all actually feel that you should use APIs on in your website, so that your website can just get more better. You can try to improve your website, and APIs are not at all time consuming. It just takes you like hours to like it just takes you 1 hour to set up an API and gets, yeah, if you know
yeah,
how
and
to
it
do
Yeah.
it.
even
So
becomes more secure.
Yeah, it
yeah,
becomes
that
more
only,
secure since that is
and like it is easy
professionally
to
built.
integrate too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to do that for your personal projects, that will be more secure.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's true.
Yeah.
And that was like pretty much in for this podcast, right? I guess like everything
Yeah,
is like great. APIs are cool, yeah, that's like very cool. And yeah, like that was pretty much in for this podcast. Like we have covered each and every single topic that you need to know about APIs. And we'll like directly see you in the next podcast. And stay tuned for the next podcast. And the next podcast will be like all about
Yeah.
another series, like as we are concluding all about series. The next podcast will be about all about, we'll fix about that, right? So
We'll
we'll just
think
like
about
see about all about, yeah, we'll just think about that at that. And yeah, we'll see you then. And thanks Amish for joining us. It was like a pretty
thank you
much
for
great
having me.
podcast, having a great experience. Yeah, welcome
Yeah.
for you. So yes guys, see you then. Happy geeks for
Yeah.
geeks. Thank you.
See you next time. Bye.
Peace. Yeah, sure, see you.